A first grade teacher seated her students in a circle, and she asked them what they wanted to be when they grew up. One by one, each child got up and announced, "I'd like to be a nurse like my mother," or "I want to be a banker like my father," or "I want to be a teacher like you, Miss Smith." The last child to speak was the most shy and timid little boy in the class. He said, "When I get big, I'm going to be a lion tamer at a circus. I'm going to face those animals with my whip and chair and make them leap through hoops of fire and obey all of my commands." Seeing the disbelieving looks on the faces of his classmates that he could ever act so boldly or bravely, he was quick to reassure them, "Well, of course, I'll have my mother with me." Like the student, Jacob expected his mother to protect him from all sorts of trouble, even when he was the source of the trouble. When he attempted to kill his mother was there to protect him. When he lied and betrayed his brother Esau, his mother was there to shield him and protect him from facing any ramifications of his bad behavior. So it probably came as a great surprise when he discovered that after he lied to his father to steal his older twin brother's blessing, his mother simply advised him to run away to live with her side of the family. Alone, without his mother, he discovered there were ramifications for his bad behavior. Struggling to make sense of his life and to find a resolution to the memories of his bad behavior when he was younger, he wrestles with his conscience, which constantly afflicted his mind to remind him of the sinner he used to be. While he wrestled with his memories, he was informed that his brother Esau had discovered where Jacob and his family were residing and was traveling with over 400 men toward his location. Jacob feared the worst as he believed that his past, which haunted him, had finally caught up to him. He was overwhelmed by fear and resolved that since his brother was coming to kill him and his family, they would only be part of his family. Prior to our reading in Genesis, he split his family into two parts. A smaller part he sent forth to Canaan, and the other group he kept with him in hopes that Esau would feel he had gotten his revenge. That night, before his brother arrived, Jacob sent the larger group across the river Jabbok, while he remained alone to deal with his inner demons. Attempting to sleep, he was confronted by a stranger who wrestled with him. As daylight arrived, Jacob recognized that he was wrestling with God. And surprisingly, even though God should have been the heavyweight favorite, Jacob was winning. When God attempted to tap out, Jacob refused to stop. Jacob, who had gained the upper hand, refused to let God go until God revealed all the mysteries of heaven and earth. Instead of giving Jacob the answers he was seeking, God gave him a blessing, saying, "You are no longer called Jacob, the deceiver. Instead, you'll be called Israel," which means the one who strives with God. And receiving this blessing, he is informed that he will receive additional blessings in his life. Crossing the river to wait for his brother's arrival, he was transformed so that he no longer feared his brother's arrival. After all, he had seen the face of God and lived. So it's important to note here that Jacob was transformed with more than a change of name and a promise of blessings. He was also left with a limp. Though many of us would probably be upset or frustrated that after an encounter with God, we could have a lifelong wound. But for Jacob, he was thankful for the limp, as it was a physical reminder that he had encountered God, which also becomes a reminder for us. So when we have an encounter with God, we are no longer the same. Whether we're struggling with our memories of our sinful past, or we're struggling to live into Jesus' humility and grace, or we're attempting to break free from our fear, or be freed from some addiction of self-pity, or from some additional harmful addiction. Sometimes it takes God to engage us and wrestle us to the ground so we see the path God has in store for us, which can lead to life-enhancing opportunities. The challenge is, This path of life-enhancing opportunities can often change our plans, which can be painful. We tend to pull our muscles when we are stretched in new directions, especially moving from selfishness to sacrifice. We feel our sides ache as we step onto the path in faith. And though the new path God reveals may seem frightening or produce some great anxiety within us, because we've never gone that way before or even done things like that before, the path reveals, thankfully, that God is at our side, going with us as we are both broken and blessed. Reflecting back on the night Jacob and God wrestled, Jacob held tightly to God's, and so should we. Gripping onto God gives us the assurance that God remains with us through the process of change and that God is part of the process as well. At the end of the wrestling match, as the sun rose on the horizon, Jacob realized that his encounter with God transformed his life so that he was connected to both God and his brother in a new way. Prayerfully, we'll have the same experience as our wrestling match prayerfully comes to an end. For example, for over a year, we've been wrestling with a global pandemic. We've been wrestling with our ministry budget, attempting to remain faithful, even though our anxiety limits our vision. We've been wrestling over our ideas about racial justice and equality. We've been wrestling with God's blessings, the ones we're receiving and the ones we'd prefer to receive. These are things we've been wrestling with. Yet thankfully, Jacob's story reminds us that the wrestling match does have a conclusion. The important thing is to hang on to God and don't let go. Don't lose grasp of God. Have faith that we can hang in there with God and that we will ultimately persevere just as Jacob persevered. And we will persevere like many others who have persevered before us. For instance, when Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was asked what drove him to work with the poor and prisoners, he responded that he supports their cause because he wrestles with the angels. By wrestling, he is strengthened and shaped so he can stand with the messed up, the beaten up, and the downtrodden. Wrestling, he learned to keep his grasp on God so that he became fully aware of the pain of living and the pain that others experience. And though he struggled, he declared that he would not give in. Like him and like Jacob, we are in this wrestling match and we must not give in either. We must cling to God so we learn our humility and learn our strengths. Wrestling, we are shaped and have been formed so we are equipped to do God's work and even see the world through God's eyes. Clinging to God, we are equipped to see the plans that God has in store for us, plans that allow us to seek the kingdom of God first, plans that inform us that we are glorious things that are on their way, so we won't have to wrestle much longer. Clinging to God and not giving in, we are equipped to see the world around us and see how we can be involved with the changes that are coming, which will glorify God's purposes. These are the things God did for Jacob, and God will do for us. At the end of the wrestling match, God informed Jacob that he no longer had to wrestle with his past. He no longer had to wrestle with his past regrets and shame, and God revealed wonderful possibilities which led to great and awesome things. One of those awesome things is that when Jacob returned to his family, he saw Esau out in the distance, and Esau saw him. Upon seeing his brother, Esau ran with joy and embraced his brother, lifting him skyward in a big, giant hug. And it was at this point that Jacob realized that the people traveling with Esau were not warriors. Rather, this was Esau's family. Now, while they sat down, Jacob peered into his brother's face and exclaimed, "I truly see in your face the face of God." From that day forward, Jacob, now called Israel, received ongoing blessings, just as we will receive immeasurable blessings, blessings that will allow us to strive on the path that God has provided, and blessings which will bring us closer to the heart of God. Like Jacob, Following our wrestling match, God will reveal the possibilities that will lead us toward great and awesome things, because God, who remains with us when we struggle, is the one who travels with us in faith. It is God who enables us to live in faith. And as our wrestling match nears an end, we will reach for new heights as we have clung to God, recognizing that God is with us. We no longer have to wrestle. As God gives us a new name and identity and empowers us to accomplish incredible things through God, who provides incredible miracles for the world, for our community, and for our congregation. Clinging to God during this wrestling match, we will be rewarded for our steadfast faithfulness. Just hang in there. Blessings are set to flow.